Well, hello, everyone. Good evening if you're in Oz, and of course, good morning if you're coming from Europe. It is our absolute pleasure to be here with you tonight on our time. Mick, it is so great to be here with you. Tonight is a very special night for so many reasons. My name is Alex Tullio. I'm the CEO of Financial Executive Women. I'm here with my amazing wingman for tonight, Mick Philippou, who is the Chief Customer Officer of Sandstone Technology. And we've been showing up live now as View for 100 episodes tonight. So it is very special. And Mick, of course, you and I started this journey some months ago. And of course, we welcomed Sandstone as amazing corporate partners. You and I started talking about the themes that our community was so interested in. And of course, one of the things that we've really pulled the thread on is this theme around digital transformation. And as you and I have discovered over the last weeks and months, interviewing some pretty amazing people, you know, we talk about technology probably this much. And of course, everything else we talk about is around people, legacy systems, cultures, behaviors, all these other things. So it's so thrilling to be here. And of course, we're rounding out 2020. This is our last episode for the year with a very special guest as well. So Mick, mate, it's so good to be here with you tonight. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Alex. Good evening to you and hello to our audience. Firstly, look, huge congratulations on pulling up the 100th episode. I think that's an amazing performance to you and the View team. And I mean, sitting back, of course, it's very exciting to be back here again on Digital First, the Banking Transformation Series. So no better way to celebrate that 100th episode. And this, of course, as you said before, it is a very, very special session because it's going to be our very first very, very decorated expert thought leader in fintech from across the world. And our first European guest, I mean, it's wonderful to be able to have this gentleman with us who's an author, he's a commentator, he's an outright troublemaker. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Chris Skinner, I'll walk you through his very decorated background. And Chris, I think I'm going to have to just abridge the version you've given me of this bio. Otherwise, we might be sitting here 20 minutes in. Chris Skinner is known as one of the most influential people in technology. He's an independent commentator on the financial markets and fintech through his blog, thefinancer.com, and author of the best-selling books Digital Bank, Value Web, and Digital Human. He chairs the Financial Services Club and Nordic Future Innovate. He's a non-executive director of 11FS and on the advisory boards of various firms, including Mode. Mr. Skinner has been an advisor to the United Nations, the White House, the World Bank, and the World Economic Forum, and is visiting lecturer with Cambridge University, as well as a TEDx speaker. He's also a co-founder with renowned artist Basia Hamilton of the Portrait Foundation, a non-profit platform to encourage children in the arts. In recent years, he has been voted one of the most influential people in financial technology by the Wall Street's journals, Financial News, and Thomson Reuters, as well as he's been judged Fintech Leader of Year 2020 by the Finance Monthly Global Awards, Best CEO of the Year UK 2020 by Lawyer International Legal 100, Best Financial Markets Advisor of the Year 2020 UK, again by Lawyer International Legal 100, Most Influential FinTech Commentator of the Year 2020 Finance Monthly FinTech Awards, and another 30-odd awards here, Chris. I might have to pause there. Just an incredible background that you've had, a phenomenal experience that you've amassed over so many years. Tell us a bit about where your career as an author and commentator actually began.
Thanks, Mick and Alex. And it kind of makes me feel old. Been around a while. I mean, I spent all my life working in technology companies, servicing financial institutions. I actually began on workflow in insurance companies many decades ago. And I ended up thinking you can't deal with office automation if you don't understand the office. So I took examinations in insurance to become a qualified insurance practitioner so I could understand insurance and therefore how technology applies to insurance. And I guess that's how I always think, which is you have to start with the customer and then the business process and then the technology. Unfortunately, too many people start with the technology first.
So true. Chris, first of all, welcome. It's so great that you're here, and it's really cool that you're coming to us from all the way from Poland. Like Mick said, that was such a good bio. I love that's the abridged version. But, I am endlessly curious about the human journey as well. So can you go back even maybe a little bit more about what initially set you on your path, your career? What were some of the defining moments for you early on?
I guess we've always been through moments in our lives where the course of our lives changed. In fact, it's quite funny in that I had a sliding doors moment in 1987, showing how old I am, where I was going to move to Australia, and I didn't. I always look back at that as a key moment in my life, because if I had, what would my life be now? The fact that I didn't move was because I was offered a job in London at twice the salary that I was earning at that time with Wang Computers. You have to be careful how you say that. And my life's journey has been maybe one where I've always been customer centric. And there's an issue with most of the companies I work for, to be honest, which is that they're remuneration centric. The executives in the companies I work for, particularly in the higher echelons of those companies, are much more focused on internal politics and on customer delivery. And I have a big issue with that. So I ended up, because of my issue with that, being made redundant in 2002 for the second time in my life. And I ended up starting to rant and rave and cause trouble, commentating and writing outside the industry. And for some reason, people quite like what I say. So as a result, I'm now doing that professionally for 20 years. And, I carry on. And the main thing I'm trying to do is to say, if you're not customer centric and you don't understand technology, then you are going to fail.
And that's a wonderful wonderful description of where to start in terms of customer first, and then building systems out, processes and systems to be able to support the customer use case or problem that you're trying to solve for. Chris, you've seen so much, you've written and covered so much of the financial services or fintech area, both in the United Kingdom, but more broadly across the European markets. If you think about banking, because this is Digital First, the Banking Transformation Series, what are some of the reference points that you think about in when it comes to leading the market in innovation? Some of those organisations that we've seen over the last decade that have been quite remarkable at actually putting that customer first and delivering a solution that serves that customer's needs.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I need to put it in as a marker is that I'm not European or UK, I'm global. And I hope to stay that way. The world has been globalizing for the last half a century, and the pandemic has locked us all down at home, but it hasn't stopped us being global. In fact, it's quite funny, as evidenced by this conversation, that we're as global as ever because we're connecting via video, whether you're in Poland, London, Sydney, or California. And one of the main headline companies that I talk about too much is Ant Group. And Ant Group were heading for an IPO recently, but it was stopped by the Chinese government because of politics. Or you could say because of Jack Ma, and he annoyed President Xi, whatever. But the reason I point to Ant Group is that they started in 2003 with Alipay from a blank piece of paper. And that's a fantastic opportunity to develop a business. But what then amazes me is their vision, vitality, and speed. And they've refreshed their core systems architecture 5 times since 2003. And you think about that, in 17 years, they've completely re-architected 5 times. And yet when I go to a traditional financial institution, they probably haven't re-architected since 1970. And there is the issue, which is if you understand technology and how to change the way in which the customer journey operates and refresh regularly to address the customer need, then there's a clear path to long-term success. A lot of people don't get that. I mean, I remember chairing a conference in Africa, and I had M-Pesa on the panel, which, if you know the African continent, and particularly Kenya, M-Pesa is the leading mobile payments provider. And I said to them, how do banks compete with you? And the CEO of M-Pesa said to me, they don't. They copy us. We just focus on the customer. We just look at what the customer's doing and what they need. And I think that's the key thing, that most banks, particularly traditional banks, focus upon providing products and looking for share of wallet by pushing services through traditional media and looking at channels. Whereas Ant Group and M-Pesa look at how do we deal with the customer need by providing greater access to digital services. And I now describe this as omni-channel versus omni-access. Channel is what banks talk about, and it's really last century. It's like saying, I'm going to record or tape something. You don't do that anymore. Access is what people want. They want access to service wherever they are, whenever they need it. And that's what M-Pesa and Ant Group do really well.
Chris, I'd love to pull this thread a bit more because, as you say, I mean, it seems it's so obvious, isn't it? You look after your customers, long-term growth, tech's the enabler, not the thing. Like they all say, like none of these are new things to say. And yet, as you say, so few in this industry are really heeding that and transforming in that way. Why do you think that is? Like, why does it need someone like you? And I was going to ask you why you are the self-proclaimed troublemaker, and you've kind of given us a bit of an insight. But why does it need someone like you to be saying, this isn't good enough. You're missing a big trick here. What do you think? Is it arrogance? Is it just the norms of doing business the same way and kind of being a key part in society that will never be scared of competitors? Like, what do you think's going on here that's really holding this transformation up from a customer perspective?
But the core within the banking industry is not arrogance, it's ignorance. It's ignorance of technology capabilities and technology opportunity. And the leadership team of most banks are bankers, and they understand risk, regulation, compliance, and accounting and numbers and finance. They have no idea what the difference is between artificial intelligence and machine learning or distributed ledger technology and blockchain. And I'm not saying they have to be experts in those domains, but I'm saying they have to have a balance in the leadership team between those domains. They can't just be bankers. They have to have digital and banking. So when I wrote the most recent book, Doing Digital, I picked out a bunch of banks that I thought were trying to do digital transformation really well. JP Morgan Chase, BBVA, ING, DBS, China Merchants Bank. And I went and visited with them all and interviewed them all. And it really struck home to me when I met with BBVA that half of their executive leadership team have a digital background from telecommunications and technology. You know, that their chairman and chief executive came from telecommunications and technology, but equally on the executive leadership team, they don't just have a CIO, they have a head of data, a head of engineering, a head of customer insight analytics. You know, that they have people driving the organization forward from a digital view and from a banking view. And if you don't have that balance, I think you're really missing a trick.
That's a really interesting observation. We had the luxury and privilege of speaking to Lewis Uguina, who's ex-BBVA and one of the executives now for Macquarie Bank here. And Macquarie Bank in Australia, as you would be fully aware, have invested very, very heavily in their digital and their technology strategy, as has Commonwealth Bank, and doing exceptionally well. And really their focus has been scaling up in terms of their people capability to be able to lead and make those changes. Chris, I think there's so many questions we could take from here. One I would love to be able to go to is, though, you know, what does the future bank actually look like?
Well, I talk about the future bank as having a number of new dimensions. Obviously, you know, people say banks will be disintermediated, disrupted, destroyed. That's absolute claptrap. That will not happen. It's a completely wrong view. Maybe it's a view that people would like to have, but the reason why banks won't disappear is that it's a core service that is about trust intermediation. So Bill Gates said 25 years ago, we need banking, but we don't need banks anymore. Wrong. Banks provide banking, which is intermediating trust as a store of value, as an exchange of value across borders. That will never disappear. What you will have in the future is lots of layers over and above that core store of value and intermediation of trust, which is where fintech's making a big difference, because what banks expanded into, and they don't do very well, is credit, savings, loans, payments, and other services that now fintech's doing much, much better with technology, like the Stripes of this world through APIs. But banks will still exist as a store of value and intermediator of trust. So the bank of the future, I think the opportunity for those who want to seize it, and I often talk about this in my lectures, is first of all, they have to decide where is their strength, front, middle, or back office, because they're not good at all of them. And historically, they've done all three, front, middle, back office. In the future, they will not do all three. There are too many competitors who are doing it better in front, middle, back office. So where do you want to succeed? What's your core focus? Front, middle, or back office? Infrastructure, products, or customer relationship? Front, middle, or back office? In that, you then have to say, what is it that's needed for the customer? Keep going back to the customer need. And right now, a great example for me is, to illustrate the change, real-time services. So I can get an insurance for my iPhone or Samsung or whatever you have to leave the house for the next 8 hours, and it cost me 25 cents. Why did I have an annual insurance product? Well, in the last century, I had an annual insurance product because it cost too much to do anything more frequently than every 12 months. But now with technology, I can do something in the next 12 seconds. That's the difference. So real-time services, excuse me. And equally, I think the data analytics piece is a critical piece here, which is really understanding the customer remotely digitally, but dealing with them personally digitally. So really leveraging your data knowledge and analytics to give the customer a sense of not creepiness, like we're following you on your data, but like, oh, did you realize that you're being really stupid because you're paying all this money every month to XYZ broadband and you don't need to? You could halve your costs per month if you went to ABC broadband. We don't get that right now from our financial providers. That's what we should be getting. That's what personal financial management is all about, which is saying, I'm not going to leave you hanging to dry in the wind with providers who are costly and irrelevant. I should be dealing with you on a very individual level where I understand what you're doing, but at the same time trying to make your life smarter. And so many financial companies aren't geared up for that, and mainly because of going back to what we were saying before, that they're geared for last century physical distribution and not this century digital distribution.
Yeah, I love this. Because often we talk, which is what you're sort of talking about now as well, is it's not one or the other either. How many of these conversations that we had about, is it physical distribution or is it digital? It's the combination and the blend of everything that you're talking about as well. It's the digital and the tech and the human side, right? Like you're dealing with other humans, and some of that's going to be through, as you're describing, and in different ways. I know also that we had a brief chat when we spoke a few weeks ago about your passion for I think the role of banks in society, and you've already touched on, a couple of big things here about value and trust and the role banks can play. And I think Mick and I might have mentioned to you, not that we expect that you remember, but Mick and I both worked for Bendigo Bank, which in Oz, it's the 5th largest retail bank here, very, built on this concept and the model of community banking, where it's very much about shared value, and it's not just about profit, and it's not just about product. That's kind of been the ethos for, I think it's now probably, 170 odd years. I'll get that wrong. But can you talk to us a bit about your thoughts on what you're seeing in this space as well, Chris? Because I think it's really important to talk about the role of banks from a societal perspective and this concept of shared value as well.
Yeah, it's a topic I'm moving into at the moment in my next book project, which I'm curating rather than writing myself. And in fact, I have one Australian financial institution involved in the project, and very welcome and open to others to get involved. So next summer, I'm going to edit a book around what I call purpose-driven business. And the focal point of that is that when the 2008 financial crisis hit, which some will remember, it didn't affect Australia so much, but it really was a huge impact in Europe and America. Lord Adair Turner, who was then the chair of our regulator, the Financial Services Authority, said much of what banking does is socially useless. And it kind of upset the bankers. And then we got into debate around, has banking lost its moral compass? As in, morally, socially, does the financial industry deal with stakeholders, or are they purely driven by profit for shareholders? And that's a bubbling topic that's been running for some time. And then it came to a little bit of a head, I guess, in the last few years with the climate emergency and the things we're seeing with bushfires in Australia, the loss of the Great Barrier Reef, the issues that we're dealing with environmentally. But it's more than just environmental. It's the inequality of society, the 1%, the Black Lives Matter movement. It's all these things that now are hitting the headlines almost every day around the social justice and how our society's become skewed to the wealthy and not the masses. And so the next project I'm working on is all about purpose-driven business and how specifically financial services can play a part in meeting the needs of society with the needs of the economy, with the needs of the government. Because going back to the intermediary of trust, the reason why banks have licenses from government is that they are the intermediator of trust between society and government. That is their job. They don't necessarily see it that way. I see it that way. And if they're socially useless and have no morality, then there's a problem. So in the next decade, particularly driven by the next decade's customers, Gen Z and millennials, banks and business will have to get some form of social justice into their purpose. They will have to become socially useful. They will have to have a moral compass that's good for society and good for the planet. They will have to change, not just delivering profit for shareholders, but delivering value for stakeholders. And that to me is an agenda that, as I say, it's been bubbling for 20 years, but it's really going to hit hard post-pandemic. And in fact, what's interesting for me about post-pandemic is, right now we're all sitting here on pause. We're going to see a massive change when someone presses the play button.
That's wonderful insight. One thing I just want to ask a question about, and you spoke about the change that's required for banks moving forward and delivering value to stakeholders. What does that value need to look like in order to be successful as a bank in the future?
Well, my tagline for my current presentations is, if you don't stand for something, you don't stand for anything, so you'll fall down. So the question is, what do you stand for? And it's not mission or vision. It's, mission is the objective of the business. Vision is where the business destination long-term needs to go. But purpose is about the value, the culture. What do we stand for? And I think a lot of companies struggle with that because they've lost it. They had it maybe early on when they were founded, and the originator of the business, particularly the original person who created that business, probably said, this is the values that we have. But now, it's all got mixed up. It's all confused. But in the next decade, it's going to become really important to say, so we can't address everything in the world. We can't deal with the climate emergency, inequality, social justice, Black Lives Matter. We can't deal with everything, but this is what we stand for. This is what we see as important. And this is where our values are directed. And this is why we're going to deliver these key programs that support our staff and our customers to focus on these key areas, because this is what we stand for. This is what's important to us. And if you don't communicate that, I just don't think you're going to have value or support. And, I deal with most banks. I have no idea what they are talking about. All I see is they're trying to create bonuses and profits for their executives and their shareholders. I want them to stand for something that's good for society.
Do you think there's a reluctance to really be bold in that? There's all the classic corporate kind of overthinking and politically correctness, and I think there's something in that a lot of probably corporate organizations and banks, kind of shy away from being really bold about what we're here to do, what we stand for. And I love what you say, Chris, because it's right. Don't be sort of paralyzed and be vague about everything and wishy-washy. Pick one thing. You can't do it all, but pick one thing and really line up the business behind it. There's a couple of things that, there are always themes that interwoven in these conversations, which I love. You finished just before saying, we've kind of been in this weird pause. And you're right, we're more globally connected than ever. And I think some people have been treating this year as a pause or maybe, a head behind the parapet. Others have been going, well, this is actually a real inflection and reflection point. But so then you said, when we push play, things are going to go fast. I mean, where do you think that pushing play is going to come from? Are you seeing something, or what are you thinking about that's going to happen where suddenly we're back and we're in, and who's going to be left behind?
A long, insightful question in terms of,
Sorry, that was a very part monologue, part question, but
well, that kind of needs a long, insightful answer in terms of where are we going next. So there's two parts to that. One is when I talk about environmental sustainability, governance, ESG, or social usefulness, I see so many financial institutions talking about it, but they talk the talk, they don't walk the walk. The greatest example of that is BlackRock, which is one of the biggest investment firms in the world, who are talking a lot, Larry Fink in particular, the CEO of that company, about environmental issues. And yet when you look at how they invest, nearly all their investments go into things that are destroying the planet, not protecting the planet's future. So they talk the talk, they don't walk the walk. And so I think that's going to be one big benchmark test. Do you walk the walk, or are you just talking the talk? So much about social usefulness and environment is PR. It's got to be actually delivering. Another good example, the United Nations came out with the principles for responsible banking in 2019, and they have over 200 financial institutions signed up for the program, one of which is a major UK bank that's actually the leading bank investing in fracking in the UK. I have to be careful how I say that, but they are fracking the planet, literally. So I think the customer and the employee will hold institutions to account on those issues. They'll say, are you actually walking the walk? It doesn't take long to Google and find out. And I think people generally are starting to become conscientious about this area. And then the second thing is, in the great unlock, when we hit the play button and stop the pause, is financial services is very different to every other industry. It's not like airlines or pharmaceuticals or retail or hospitality. The one thing about financial services is psychologically, it's the most important thing for almost all of us. When you check your bank balance, if that balance is not what you expected, that's what creates your heartbeat moving faster. If you lose a selfie on Facebook, or if you miss a flight, it's a pain. But if you lost $1 million, that makes you wake up and shake up. And that's the reason why it is so heavily regulated. And during this crisis, I think a lot of people they haven't lost $1 million, but they've lost a lot of trust in some institutions that weren't ready for lockdown. I deal with the UK bank. I haven't been able to speak to them since March because their call center shut down. And their call center was offshore in India, 4 hours notice, no backup in the UK. And even if there was a backup in the UK, it wouldn't work because everyone had to work from home. And some of my friends are saying to me, well, this bank worked really well. So when the great unlock happens, the play button switched, people will change banks. They'll change financial companies. They'll change providers very quickly. Excuse me.
And there's so many, once again, there's many points to pick up on there. But one of the things I'd like to ask you is, with regards to your long distinguished career in technology, in banking, and financial services, and all your commentary, you've seen lots of trends. Invariably, you've commented on those trends. You've been someone who's an advocate for the customer along the way. What do you think from a banking perspective? If you look at banks today, will they be the same in the next 10 years or the 20 years? What's going to change?
I'd say that obviously customer centricity, digital relationship with the human aspect of that relationship, and that's a key point, which is don't just digitize for digital sake. Don't just apply technology for technology's sake. Make sure it's done in a human way. I've seen many mistakes where people automate and get it wrong.
How do you see that playing out? Because we've spoken to many experts, from Joseph Healy at Judo Capital, Judo Bank, which is an incredible story, and they say they differentiate on relationship and never lose the human touch. But then it's about frictionless banking, frictionless onboarding, and making sure that we've got that real frictionless experience from our customers. Versus nearly every private bank will tell us the same. Give us the same feedback. They want the same thing: differentiate on relationship, but in the end, we still need this wonderful digital experience. What does that actually mean and look like, you think, in 10 years' time?
I think it's very easy to automate the things that we have always done, and that's the mistake, because the things we've always done isn't what we need today. The illustration being what I said before about real time with insurance. I don't need insurance for 12 months. I need it for 12 minutes or 12 hours. So the first aspect is challenging the whole design of the product. But before you do that, actually, before that first action, it's what is it the customer really needs? What does the customer need in a remote relationship? And how can we engage with the customer in a remote relationship in a way that feels very personal, without being creepy? And it's a balance, it's a fine tuning balance. So when we look at 10, 20 years away, the next generation banking obviously is going to be platform based, ecosystem based, integrated through APIs and an open operation, which is why I said you have to then ask yourself, what is it that our institution does well, front, middle, back office, and then let's drop the rest. The biggest issue most institutions have that are existing today, and I'm thinking of the big banks of Australia or America or Europe, is that they do everything themselves. They develop everything themselves. They control everything themselves. They want to dominate and manage the whole supply and value chain themselves. And when we talk about open banking, it's saying you've got to let go, guys. You've got to, start to open up. And everyone's nervous about that because of security and risk, et cetera, et cetera. but the regulator wouldn't ask banks to open up if it was risky. It's not risky. The risk is if you don't open up, then you don't give the customer what they need, because one of my mantras is 10,000 companies doing one thing brilliantly well will always be better than one company doing 10,000 things average or bad. So where are the things that you do well, and then let go of the things you don't do well and bring in partners to tick the boxes and fill the gaps.
I love so much about this. And as you're talking as well, I'm thinking about diversity as well, because, again, lots said about, and it's not just through a gender lens or a race, it's diversity of like on so many facets. So I'd love to get your thoughts on that. And especially as, we're all talking about this, and this is all this groupthink is real, isn't it? So as you're describing, even some of the big guys that say they listen to the customer, and Mick, you and I have talked about this with other guests as well, it's very easy internally when you're trying to control all the moving parts and own the whole value chain, as you say, Chris. You can't. You can only see what's happened before or what you're in. You lack that other perspective and that diversity of lived experience and thinking and all sorts of things. So can you talk to us a bit about whether do you see diversity as an issue in this context, or what are your thoughts around that topic?
Again, I've written quite a lot about diversity, and normally people interpret diversity as, we need to have more ladies on the board.
And they do. Can I just state for the record, it's not that simple, but that is a fact.
It's not as simple as that. It's actually representing humanity and representing your customer engagement and your customer demographic. I actually talk a lot about, for example, Fintech is the marriage of, or the partnership rather, of the child with the parent. Finance is the parent, technology is the child. How do you bring them to an equitable relationship? When you look at some of the most amazing Fintech companies like Stripe, they were started by teenagers. John and Patrick Collinson were 21 and 19 years old when they began Stripe. There's actually a Thai-based blockchain company created by a 9-year-old, so and a girl. So you need to bring the diversity to the organization, and I guess it's very much around the way the world's changed in my lifetime. When I grew up, most of the companies I dealt with, particularly in Europe and America and the world, were led by old white men. It's not the way the world is anymore, guys. When you look at the world today, it's globalized, and therefore every company is global, and therefore every company needs a global leadership team. It needs a global operation. It needs to have a global recognition of its global customers. And even if you think, we're just in Australia, guys, well, look at Australia. Australia is not just people who've emigrated from Britain. It's like a whole hodgepodge of Asian, European, and global population. So if you don't have that representation in the leadership team and in the organization, then you're really missing a trick.
Yeah.
And look, I think going back before, you mentioned purpose. Does that fit with this theme?
It does. It does. And I don't believe in percentages, or saying that we have to have 30% of our board is female, or any of those sorts of false metrics. It's more saying, what is it that we need? And it's quite funny, because I've got a friend in the US who gets very annoyed with every announcement saying, there's a woman executive just been appointed at this bank. So like Jane Fraser, who's just been appointed as CEO of Citibank. And the headline is, a woman has become a bank CEO. Come on, guys, it's the 21st century. I think what we have to do is recognize several different themes here. So there's the digital transformation theme, which is obviously an imperative, because we're living in the 21st century and the internet is everywhere and the network is everywhere, 5G, etc. There's the diversity theme, which is that we deal with a global audience, not just of old white men, but everyone. And then there's the purpose theme, which is we have to recognize that, in the 20th century, a lot of what the business activity was about was just making money. In the 21st century, it's about creating value and making sure we don't destroy our planet.
Yeah. Beautifully put. We're nearly out of time. This goes really fast. Well, for us, it does. Chris, I want to ask you a bit about your legacy. And you could use whatever word that, I know, right? It's a big word. But, you think about everything that you've done and you're doing, as you said, over decades of being the troublemaker and rattling the cages and challenging norms and status quos. And it's a really important voice. And I think I'll probably get this wrong, but you're 16 books in, soon to be the curated 17th, as you were saying. So you are using your voice, you are being bold, you clearly want to have an impact and make a change. So, what do you want to leave behind? If there's one thing that, you look back and go, you know what, I changed the conversation on this, or I had an impact there. Is there something that you think about in that context?
I haven't actually, but I guess I'm lucky in that I was made redundant. And a lot of people, when they face losing their job, crumble. If anything, it made me bigger and better and stronger, because you have to be a fighter. You have to, get out of that rut. And I ended up doing what I'm doing today because I'm passionate about the system and the way it works and how technology can change it. And so I guess my main, thing that I would want to leave with everyone is someone that's been working around the industry for all their career, change the industry. Simple. More than that, I'm working on some children's books. And so I'd like to make sure that children have a enjoyable future exploring space. And that's my next project.
Very cool.
That's fantastic. That's next level. And Chris, as Alex said, it just has absolutely raced by. I think we're just crept over time. And Chris Skinner, you've wooed our audience. It's been very insightful listening to you, from digital transformation to diversity to purpose, and also to almost social meaning, social justice, and just having a real difference that banks need to make in this 21st century and beyond. It's been a privilege, as we said. We really appreciate your time this evening. This is the 100th episode, as Alex alluded to. So what better way than to spend it with Chris Skinner?
I should say, thank you so much for having me on your centennial episode as the first European.
Oh, look, it beautifully aligned. So it's our absolute pleasure. And I know you actually had to put off reading a book to your kids to be here. So that's an even bigger sacrifice. So thank you again. It's been such an interesting conversation. As Mick said, thank you so much, Chris. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, especially on this side of the hemisphere. It is later than usual, but I hope you've enjoyed this. This is our last episode for 2020. What a great way to send it out. Some really big themes there to really ponder on. Thank you, everyone. Have a brilliant night. Have a great Christmas, New Year, time with family, time to reflect, and time to design the 2021 that you want next year after everything that's happened this year. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Mick. I'll see you in the new year.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Chris. Bye to our audience.